Do you know what a virus variant is? Do you know what an isolate or a strain is? If you don't and you'd like to find out, keep on watching. I'm Vincent Racaniello, and I've been a virologist for nearly 40 years. And today I want to explain to you the terms virus, isolate, variant, strain, and a couple more. As you're well aware, this is March 1st, 2021. Pandemic has been on for about a year now, caused by SARS-CoV-2. Many people are thinking about viruses, and so they're using terms that they may not be familiar with, like isolate, variant, and strain. So I thought I would tell you what I think those terms mean. Now, the problem is, as shown in this first slide, there's no universally accepted definition for these terms, strain, variant, and isolate, in the virology community. So how can we expect that everyone else gets them right? What happens is you're trained in someone's laboratory and you hear them say things and you associate a meaning with them, and that's what you do. And they may or may not be right. By the way, this little nugget of wisdom comes from this paper where Jens Kuhn is the first author. It was published in Archives of Virology in 2013. And I will make a few other quotations from that article as well. Now, despite this looseness of definitions, for example, there's no one place where you could go and find the definition for variant, for example, or isolate or strain. I looked in several textbooks. In fact, not even my textbook, Principles of Virology, co-authored with 4 other virologists. Not even there will you find a definition of these terms. I think we need to put it in the next edition, though. Let's go through and try and define them and put them in some kind of context with the current outbreak. Let's start with isolate. What is an isolate? An isolate is a virus that we have isolated from an infected host, and we have propagated that in culture. Now, isolating encapsulates the meaning. It means that you take a sample from someone who you think might have a virus infection, you put that sample in cells in culture, which is how we grow viruses, and you grow a virus, and now you have an isolate. Let me illustrate.
Okay. Hang on a second. So obviously, poor Vince is kind of clueless. And I must say, I didn't show this to make fun of Vince, although maybe that's sort of what's happening. It's just to say, so as he says, isolation, meaning finding the virus in a pure form so it can be studied, there is no definition of this. It's not even in his textbook that after 40 years, he wrote with 4 other virologists. And then he says, an isolate is a virus that we've isolated from a cell culture, which propagates the virus. So the cell culture, he said, is a propagation technique, not an isolation technique. So this is ridiculous. So the definition of what is to dig a hole, that means the hole has been dug. Like, people don't talk like this. And the reason I bring this up, again, is not so much to make fun of Vince, who is obviously seeming like a nice guy and friendly and etc. I'm sure he means well. I'm not sure, but I would imagine. But he's totally clueless and doesn't understand the meaning of words and has never apparently looked in a dictionary. My point is, as we're going to move on in our search from the truth, if you're hung up on whether viruses are real and this hasn't convinced you, listening to Vince and 40 years of virology, I don't know what will. And so that becomes I can only say it's a kind of psychological problem that you're having, and I don't think you're going to get very far in this next phase, because looking at virology and trying to decide whether it's real, that's like sort of like kindergarten. And what I'm hoping is in this next year, we move on to like the grades, and then maybe even high school. And then we actually move on to things that are actually difficult to understand. Because if you hear this guy not know even what they mean, they even can't give you a definition, and then give you these crazy definitions. To isolate means the virus has been isolated. And that doesn't say to you, this is done. Like, I don't need to deal with this issue anymore. It's going to be hard to move on.